I was like, I felt all this electricity pass through my entire body, man. And I thought I was going to die, but I was like, it totally charged me when I let go. And I was like stuck. I couldn't let go. But when I managed to let go, I was like charged. I was like angry. I was like, what the fuck? I don't want to fucking die yet. What the fuck are you doing? So I went and I put the tape over it. And, I was just careful, man, after that. But I mean, yeah, like the father of my wife's son, his brother died. He stepped out of a bathtub after taking a shower, and he had a live wire running through the floor of his tub, and he stepped on it and fucking killed him. Because I guess he was all wet, and he was only like 23 years old. But, yeah. But, yeah, man, lots of weird shit happened in that neighborhood. Like there was this on 2 doors down. There was this guy who lived right next to us, who was this gay guy who I actually never even saw once. I guess he was locked up in his house all the time. But and I looked in his backyard, and it was totally like dilapidated. I mean, our house wasn't the only house that was totally dilapidated. All the houses there was, except for the house across the street, where her childhood friend was from. They had a cool backyard. Oh, and her best friend, they had a cool backyard too. But like when I looked in the house behind us, and both of the houses behind us and the one next to us, the whole backyard was just overgrown grass and just bricks and like pieces of wood piled everywhere. Festering ground for rats. And I guess they put rat poison all over the place, which is bad because it kills cats. Like we had a cool cat named Plomy, which means silver, because he was a silver cat. He wasn't even full grown yet. He just disappeared one day, and we figured he died from eating poison. And yeah, and like their family dog died a couple of weeks after we moved back to America, and they didn't know why, and maybe that was because he got into some poison. But yeah, but like, so there's this gay guy, and then right on the other side of the gay guy, 2 houses down from us, was this old lady, and then her daughter, who was like my wife's age, and then she had a son who was like 11. And you see that a lot, like 3 generations living in one house. I mean, we had 3 generations living in our house. And there were even 4 generations in the family. My wife's father's mother lived out on the other side of town. And she'd come over a couple times. But, yeah, but I guess, and so like, but when they don't get along with each other, they don't have the money to move out, so they have to stay living with each other. And so that's kind of what caused a lot of problems with the family, between my wife's mom and dad. Because they like really should have been getting divorced, but they were together because they just had to out of necessity, living in the same house. It's interesting how they got that house. They bought the house and they were paying the mortgage, and they still owed like I don't know how much, all this mortgage on it. But then the coup happened in 1973, and everybody in the country took their money out of the bank, except for a couple of people, like my wife's parents, probably because they were just too lazy to do it, but they didn't do it. And so like as a reward to them, Pinochet bought the rest of their house for them, just paid it off. So they totally got hooked up. But yeah, so like 2 houses down, there's this old lady, and I think I remember seeing her. I guess she'd be up really early every morning, like sweeping, but her daughter like freaked out one day. Like she suddenly disappeared, and everybody thought that, and she told all of her family members that her mother had moved down south to her other family members in Patagonia, but like those family members said that she never came there and she didn't know what happened to her. So they kind of started to suspect foul play. So the cops came over, and anyway, what turned out happening was, she banged her mama over the head with a hammer, killed her, made her son, her 11-year-old son, dismember the body and put it into a suitcase and bury it in the backyard, only 4 inches underground. And so the cops came one night, and they exhumed it, and I remember seeing them taking the body out on the stretcher into the ambulance, and they had like a bunch of fire trucks there or something, and they had like the national news come, and they actually interviewed my wife, and so I saw my wife on national news getting interviewed for like a long time, just like talking about the lady who did it, because they were like childhood friends, and like, oh, she seemed normal to me, I don't know. And I remember seeing like my wife, she looked really hot on TV. And then they interviewed the lady who this woman lived with. I guess this woman, she got creeped out by living in her house after she killed her mom. So she moved out of her house and just left the house there, just like abandoned, and moved into some other like cheap hostel. And so they interviewed the neighbor of the people of her cheap hostel, and I recognized that girl who they interviewed. She was the girlfriend of my drug dealer who I got weed from. So that was cool. That was crazy. So and I guess a lot of people saw me also in commercials that I made, and I saw my wife's nephew, the kid who played with me. I saw him in some commercials, but I never once saw myself in a commercial, and I never bothered to get a copy of the commercials that I did. Man, I wish I did. Put them on YouTube. Maybe I could call the company, find out who they are, and call them and get my hands on that commercial. That'd be cool. But anyways, because I did one commercial where I was like this businessman walking down the road, and I'm like supposed to pretend that I'm like really like tired, really hot because like I have the wrong kinds of shoes on, and I'm like oh. I was like the grumpy businessman, and they had the other businessman who was like the happy businessman with the good shoes. I was always typecasted as the businessman because I was white and stuff. But anyways, yeah, so they exhumed her, and I smelled it, man. It smelled like, like skunk or something. And yeah, they even went in our backyard and stood on top of this big semi that I guess her dad was fixing to film the backyard, trying to get a shot of where they exhumed the body and everything. And then a couple months later, they got some new tenants in there, and in that same exact house, something happened, and that house like burned down. There were these flames that were like 30 feet high, and so these two fire trucks come and put the fire out, and then national news comes again. And they come to our backyard, jump on that truck again, and film the fire from the same exact place that they filmed the exhumation from, or just a couple months beforehand. So it's like we were like the center for like national news. That's what they'd come over and film from our backyard because of this cursed house. But yeah, it was kind of a rough neighborhood. Like there was this 8-year-old kid who got raped and murdered only 4 blocks from our house, and my stepson got mugged coming home from the subway, which just opened a couple months before we left. And I actually got mugged too of my bike. Only 3 weeks before I came home, I went down there on my sandals to the projects to get weed. And I usually, when I went down there, I'd go down there with my running shoes, just in case somebody tried to mug me, I could fight them off. But I went down there that time with these really bad sandals that would fall off if I tried to run. And I just got bum rushed, man. There was just all these kids around me, punching me in the face and like yanking on my bike and picking my pockets, and just got overwhelmed by the numbers. And I couldn't fight them because I didn't want to get my feet stomped and get these blisters on my feet and stuff. So I ran after the kid, but he ran off, and that was it for my bike. It was my fault though, because I knew that these kids wanted to rob me because they'd always like give me the evil eye and run up to me and be like, give me money or I'll get you weed. And I was like, what? You give you money and then you come back? That's not going to work. And then he'd like roll his eyes and like scowl at me and walk off. But he didn't fuck with me because I had my shoes on. But just that one time. And I was also like really high when I went down there. And it was like 3 weeks before I came back, and just didn't have any energy. It was stupid. But I guess it's something like that has to happen once in your life. But yeah, I gave like $10 to one old guy there to get me some weed, and he just disappeared. But yeah. But it was cool to be able to get weed whenever I wanted. Only it was really bad weed. It was like $1.50 to get a little bit, but it was like brick from Paraguay. And once when I got high with my stepson when he was 13, he started smoking weed. I mean, I was smoking weed in front of him since he was 9, but he never wanted to smoke weed with me. And he ended up getting high with me. And actually, he got high with me before he got high with his own dad. He started smoking weed with his dad after he started smoking weed. But the first time, he's like, yo, you want to get high? I was like, did you smoke weed? He's like, I got some. I was like, fuck. So we're getting high, and he busts out his Paraguayan weed. And he holds the brick up to me. He's like, oh, look, a bug. And I was like, what? We look at it, and there's this like petrified fucking mosquito in there. And he's like, oh, look, yeah, a piece of honey. And he pulls out a piece of honey and shows it to me. I was like, oh my God, those bastards, they mix